Well, hello and welcome to episode number 363 of the Plane Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, and in this week's show, Southampton Airport finally gets the green light for expansion. One airline bins off all their A350s for the much better Boeing 787, and the Airbus Beluga drinks some cooking oil. In the military this week, the Nigerian Air Force is set to receive Super Tucanos in the near future. Ukraine has decided to drop its Russian-made MiG fleet and pursue an all-Western Air Force. New Zealand's Wings over Wanaka Air Show starts to get planned, and the Commemorative Air Force opens its new hangar and education centre in Dallas, Texas. So joining me this week, as always, across the village in the PTUK Master Suite studio, it is, of course, Matt Smith.
I'll turn my microphone on, that'll help. Hello, everyone. so busy worrying about anything else. Yes, very good, thank you. Yes, all good, lovely.
Good, glad to see you've got a nice background behind you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yes.
Excellent.
You reminded me to change it just in time. Thank you.
I know. And joining us across the country in the stately manner that is in Buckinghamshire, it's of course Neville Bounds.
Yes, hello everybody. Good to be here again. And I have had my hair cut this week, finally. Although when I went into the hairdresser, they said, Mr. Bounds, you really should have come in for an estimate.
Right. Oh gosh. Okay. Yes, I had mine cut this week as well. I was very excited. I was very lucky because I was on my barbers had a VIP list, and I'd made it onto the VVIP list, so I was very excited by that.
Well, it's good to have you back on again, Nev, as always. And we can have haircuts now in the UK.
I know.
Whoopee.
We're also allowed in outside beer gardens and things like that, which I'm quite excited about. Yeah.
I intend on making full use of that tomorrow evening.
Indeed. Oh,
anyway,
right.
more on that later. He's back this week after being away. We gave him a few weeks off, but I'm pleased to say, and there'll be some very happy people in the chat room this evening, he's back. It is the legend that is Armando.
Hey guys, I am happy to be back, and of course I wouldn't miss this show because it's no longer Plane Talking UK. You're going to see here in a minute that the Americans are we don't outnumber, but at least equal to the number of Brits on the show today. Yeah. So
infiltrating,
we'll have to just change it to
taking over. Yeah.
Plane Talking Atlantic. We'll keep it diplomatic.
Okay, right.
Plane Talking Atlantic.
Wow, okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
Yes, we have got some guests. But just going to say a quick hello to everyone in the chat room before we move on to our guests. We've got all the usual family members in there. Going to quickly run through these because we have got to push on quick today. So Lee Davis, hello to you. Nick Codling. We've got Alex Robinson and Richard Adams. Hello to you, Richard. Lane Street. Obviously, Lane's got to be in there. Tanya W is also in the chat room. We've got Auntie Liz over in Canada. Captain Cruz, Rakon is also in there. Masha, hello to you, Masha. Dirk S says he's here for Jason. We've got Jenny as well over in Rome. So hello to you in Rome. Hope the weather's been good for you as it has been for us here in the UK today. It's been like summer. But don't forget, thanks obviously to everyone for joining us on the YouTube chat room this evening. And don't forget, for anyone listening to the audio version of our show, don't forget you can check us out over on YouTube. Just check us out and search for Plane Talking UK on YouTube. Also, for anyone joining us for the first time this evening, you're very welcome along as well. We are, as you mostly all know, an aviation podcast written by passengers. Well, apart from Armando, for anyone, we cover the latest and sometimes quirkiest aviation news, bringing you content from worldwide air shows and events, and we interview and introduce you to some of the most incredible people in aviation. So join us for this episode, and if you enjoy us, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to us as well for more, and share the links with your friends. So speaking of incredible people in aviation, it gives me great pleasure to welcome onto the show for their first time. It's the two guys from one of the greatest podcasts of aviation on the podcast channels, from the AvTalk Podcast from FR24. It is Ian and Jason. So welcome onto the show.
Thanks so much for having us. Hey, happy to be here.
Great, guys. So how are things for you guys? Obviously, the time difference is slightly early where you are, so you guys are probably still at work or working, so you can't be with us long. But how are things?
Things are well. They're not as well as they are over by you. We don't have the evening podcast feel yet, which I'm a little bit jealous of. But we'll get there. Yeah, it's been a week. It's beautiful out, and they're landing right over the house. So it's always nice to see the heavies come in right over the house in the middle of recording a podcast, of course.
Well, as this is an aviation podcast, we can't think of anything better, frankly. So that works for us.
Actually, to be honest with you, most of our listeners would be able to identify the engine types and what aircraft it is just from the background.
Yeah.
I mean, that's happened before.
Yeah, they'd rather listen to the engines than us. I'll be honest. But
So we're going to talk about the podcast you guys do in a bit. But first, I suppose we'll kind of find out what it is you guys do, because some of the listeners may not know. So we'll start with Jason. Jason, what job do you have within the aviation world?
So currently I work for a company called ATP Co, and my specialty is airline products, the passenger experience, the stuff on the plane that you sit in, play with, interact with, or eat, I guess, even. We part of what I do specifically is we catalog all that information for like what is on every plane, what is going to be on every flight, so that when you book a flight, you know that you are getting a lie flat seat in like a 111 configuration with like a good meal, as opposed to another airline or a different flight on the same airline 20 minutes later that could have a much worse product for the same amount of money. And that's my secret day job that I don't tell many people. So keep it between us.
Okay.
It sounds very interesting, I will say, Jason. That keeps you busy, I expect. But
yeah, especially these days where airline fleets are so in flux. It's increasingly difficult to know what aircraft airlines have these days, because they're coming and going and being grounded and ungrounded so quickly. It's given us a bit of whiplash.
So Ian, a bit about yourself. What do you do within the industry?
I have one of the best jobs in aviation, is what I tell people, because I get to look at Flightradar24 all day, and I get to tell people about it, like come on this show and talk about what we do and how we do it, and what Jason and I get up to on a regular basis. But I get to explain how we track flights at Flightradar24. I get to go to I used to get to go to amazing industry events, and hopefully we'll get to go to them again soon. And I get to just have the kind of fun that I think a lot of avgeeks would love to have.
It's one of the apps I think that most of us here in the UK definitely use, and I know that pretty much everyone I know has the app, and you always get the people who look up in the sky, oh, what's that? Flightradar24. Click on the app, and yeah, it's a good job.
To be fair, I don't even like aviation, and somehow I'm a silver member. I don't know quite how that happened.
we get you. We suck you.
Yeah. So the podcast then, guys. How did the podcast start? The AvTalk Podcast.
We had an idea for a podcast within the company, and Jason and I had been friends, and we're kind of we still are friends, but we had been kind of hosting a podcast in conversation with each other. And decided, well, why don't we, instead of just talking to each other, why don't we record this and see if anyone else wants to listen? And it turns out that enough people did that we kept doing it.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. We just took what we typically wrote to each other in Google Messenger and put it in audio form every other week, and there's our podcast.
Yeah, it's a good. The actual show itself. Obviously, you guys you put out fairly regular content. Each is it two or three episodes a month? I think you guys put out at the moment, don't you?
Yeah, it's every other week.
Yeah. But kind of what do you kind of focus on the show? I mean, I know because I listen to the show, but what for our listeners who may not have listened to the show yet, but are going to start listening to you now, what kind of content do you put out on your show?
Sure. So what we try and do is find things that we're interested in, anything that's happened over the past 2 weeks that we found interesting, that may have, there was a headline, but it didn't really capture the full story. And then we'll take it from there and see what else we can dig up and dig into. And in between those kind of conversations, between Jason and I, we like to bring on guests who we also find interesting. We know that if we're not interested in it, our listeners aren't going to be interested in it. So we've talked with some really interesting pilots who fly, not necessarily. We talked to passenger airline pilots and things like that, but I think some of our most interesting conversations have been with pilots who aren't necessarily doing a standard airline type job. The Maria Langer, for instance, comes to mind, who dries cherries with a helicopter. And so that was always a fun one to talk about, where you're like, wait, you do what with what now? And to find out things in the aviation world that we didn't know were jobs. We didn't know you could do. And that was definitely one of them that very surprising, that not only is there one person who does it, but it's kind of a whole industry out in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, and that's definitely what drives our podcast, is that we don't cover a topic if it doesn't personally interest us. We often see a lot of headlines that we'll throw in our show notes and say, neither of us actually wants to talk about this, so let's just scrap it outright. So if it's not interesting to Ian or I, we just typically don't cover it, because it's got to interest us to talk about it and have an actual genuine conversation.
Armando.
Yeah, well, I was going to add in there's a lot of aviation podcasts out there. And I was just going to kind of mention to you guys, though, I wasn't around for the 100s in the episodes of PTUK, but then the 200s got kind of easy. And by 300s, you really hit your stride. So you guys you'll have a great future ahead of you, especially because I know a lot of people that listen to your podcast. For me, a real quick shout out to just Flightradar24. For 1 year after I retired from the Air Force, I was actually an airline pilot, and your information was more accurate and updated than our dispatch. So often,
wow, okay.
No, I am not joking around. So often I would just sit there at an airport or an FBO or somewhere with a broken airplane, and then looking to see where my replacement was on FR24 and telling, my captain or my co-pilot, hey, no, ignore what dispatch is telling you. This is where the airplane is, and this is when they're going to be here. So what a fantastic product. And like these guys are talking about, I mean, everybody uses Flightradar24. I think it's one of those apps that has just become, a staple in aviation and left everybody else in the dust. But, I saw some comments here in the chat room that are, what was from Dirk, actually. It says, shout out to all active FR24 feeders. That's actually a really good question. How does Flightradar24 get its data, and how is it so good?
Sure. We've got nearly 30,000 individual receivers around the world, terrestrial receivers around the world. And we're supplementing that by, you can actually see in the fancy background I've managed to construct, the blue airplanes. That's satellite data as well. That's how we distinguish it. And so each icon on the screen is coming from one or more of the nearly 30,000 receivers that are hosted by people who either really love aviation, a lot of people that really love radio technology. We've ham operators and shortwave radio folks who got into ADS-B in kind of in its infancy, a decade or so ago, and people that are interested in aviation, whether that's individuals or a lot of airports. You mentioned an FBO, lots of FBOs host a receiver, and they'll take that, the data that their receiver's collecting, and bring that back to their own work that they're doing, so that they can, know where the plane that's coming in that they're going to have to service is coming from, when it's going to arrive, things like that. So yeah, there's all sorts of people all around the world on all 7 continents, actually, who are gracious hosts and supply us with the data that we then turn into what you see on the screen.
Can anyone get one of the transceiver boxes?
Oh no, I know where this is going.
Anyone can apply to host one of our receivers, and we put the receivers that we've custom built. Those go to to areas where we either don't have coverage at the moment, have limited coverage, or could really benefit from a boost in coverage at, say, a major airport or something where we don't already have a receiver. That said, anyone can build one of the receivers and connect it to our network, and that's that's a Raspberry Pi, a software dongle that gets plugged in. All you need is an internet connection and a few bits of kit, and then you're ready to go. And you're sharing that data that your receiver's collecting with us, and it's getting shown live on the site.
Actually,
Carlos essentially has a very long marriage with his long suffering wife that I'm convinced he's trying to bring to a rapid end. If I'm honest,
not buying any more pieces of aircraft.
Right, good.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
Apart from a receiver. Anyway, Captain Cruz actually says in the chat room. Captain Cruz says you guys have great chemistry on the show. He likes the show. He also, Captain Cruz also says that he's had his SBS-1 since 2008.
That's that's one of the older models of receivers that we have still collecting yet. I mean, they do a great job.
Wow. Excellent.
Hey guys, I got a quick question for you. So you mentioned an interesting episode with drying cherries with a helicopter.
Yeah.
Which just sounds expensive, but in all of your shows, are there any episodes that kind of stand out as your favorites or a favorite guest that you've had? What kind of stands out in your mind?
There's some my favorite episodes are the ones where we go in with kind of an idea of what we're going to talk about with the person, with the you're an airline pilot, let's talk about that. With Maria, we knew that she already had an interesting job, but my favorite episodes are the ones where we don't really know what we're going to talk about. We know kind of a general idea, but we don't know any of the specifics. A long while back, one of our first kind of interviews, we interviewed Andrew Poor, who was managing cargo for one of the charter cargo airlines in the U.S. that happens to have a call sign that is relatively like someone who used to drag race. So aviation folks will pick up on where we're going there. But Wendy's had an issue with ketchup on the East Coast. There had been some sort of foodborne illness, salmonella or something like that, in their ketchup supply, the ketchup packets. So they chartered a 747 to bring 225,000 pounds of ketchup from the West Coast to the East Coast. And just hearing that story, you think, of course, that's of course the response that one would expect from a major fast food chain to charter a 747 for tons and tons of ketchup. So I think those are the favorite kind of episodes. I would have to kind of look and see what else kind of cropped up, but those are the really fun ones.
For me, I think I'm agreeing with Dirk in the chat room and YouTube that Steve from Jet Test and Transport is still personally, at least, my favorite interview because of just how unique his role in the aviation industry is. And it's no secret that Ian and I don't really prepare all that much with our guests. So we don't really know what the answers are going to be from our guests. And the extent of what he actually does, what his day job is, how he does it, how much travel is involved in what he does. To me, that was the most interesting interview it conducted. And I think with our audience as well, that was, I'm going to guess, our most liked interview.
I mean, actually, you were saying obviously that there's one of the things that people are saying here is like the chemistry and things like that. And actually, as you say, if the subject's interesting to you, you almost don't need to do the preparation because the whole point of having the guest there is to literally do that, isn't it? Is to have a conversation with them about it. And I think it makes it much more organic. Do you know what I mean? I mean, sometimes you can almost over prepare for things. Obviously, that's never been a problem on this show, but
Yeah, well, I mean, like Jason, I think tends to oversell how underprepared we are.
I don't know.
Okay, Jason tends to oversell how underprepared I am.
Like it.
But I mean, but to that point, I think some of the best episodes have been, we're going to bring this person on because we follow them on Twitter and like, that's really cool. Let's talk to them. And some of my least favorite episodes have really been the ones where we've needed to prepare because we've been working with a PR firm or something like that in order to get this person to come talk to us. And those always feel very, very stilted. They're, you have a really interesting job, but you're under 12 layers of bureaucracy. So we're not really going to get to talk to you. We're talking to your corporation. And those are less than fun. Like, this is a fun conversation because we're talking with people who all share kind of an interest. And to the point about chemistry between Jason and I, we talk all day, every day. I mean, we are friends outside of aviation. So my wife jokes that, you have your work spouse. Well, sorry, Jason. These kind of things I think lend themselves to a real good, show that people like to listen to. At least I hope they like to listen to.
Absolutely.
I think we found some similar success. We've had, and there's just no shortage of stories in aviation. And I think a lot of people tend to focus on the piloting aspect, but we've found some of the best stories are from cabin crew or from some of the support personnel in the airports.
Yeah.
And they're certainly not used to being in a public forum like this. And, they try to ask, what are we going to talk about? Let's script it out a little bit. And we found the same success you guys have, which is, it's okay. We're just going to talk like we're sitting here having a beer, and it's going to be great because you're interesting. So I love it. I love what you guys do.
One of the questions I wondered actually is, because the aviation industry has had, a ridiculously tough, 18 months, I think it's fair to say. And it's one of the biggest challenges that we've had is to try and filter out as some of that, because we all know bad things are happening, and the challenges of trying to find things that are interesting, without all the sadness and doom and gloom. I mean, that must have been a real challenge for you guys as well.
Yeah, I mean, essentially since all of the work that we've done as Flightradar24 outside of the podcast has the past year, the previous 12 to 18 months, I mean, had just been, things are getting worse. And here are some statistics to tell you exactly how worse they're getting. And that's been real tough. But I think that on the podcast, we've tried to find more personal stories that allow, that aren't just the airline industry or aren't the aviation industry, but are, people make up this industry. There are, hundreds of thousands and millions of people really around the world who make up the industry. Let's talk to them and see how they're doing. And go from there. We know people aren't doing great, but let's talk about, let's put a human face on that a little bit.
Yeah, the interviews that we've done over the past, I guess, year at this point have really helped us balance out the good and the bad, because there are definitely a number of times where we're right up against the show, we're preparing for it, and we're searching through Google News like, come on, something good has to have happened in the last 2 weeks. Something is out there. And more often than not, it ends up being the interview that we do is that good thing that we cover for that episode.
Jason, on your the side of aviation that you work within, obviously Nev, our awesome host on the show with us here, is a big fan of BA. And Nev is our president of BA as such here. Have you had the opportunity to fly with BA? And if you have, how does their product compare to obviously your biggest legacy carriers in the US?
Oh yeah, I've flown BA plenty of times, from the 747 to the 380 to even the little A318, rest in peace, being chopped up in the next couple of weeks, I think. I have not yet had a chance to fly BA's new business class product that's out there on, I think, some of the 777s and I think the 7810s, because they don't really come to New York, and I haven't flown in 400 and something days since they've actually been flying. The old product, I have feelings about it. The yin yang staring contest with the guy sitting in front of you, and you go and push that little button and the divider goes up. It's probably the most awkward thing you can do as an airline passenger is have that face off of who's going to hit that button first. But there's definitely some much worse products out there than BA, and their new stuff looks really, really good. And I hope to one day fly it if I'm ever allowed back over to the UK as an American.
Always welcome as far as we're concerned, that I can.
Thank you.
Yeah. Not that I have much say in it, I have to be honest.
There we go. Never.
Have you ever heard of Bungie in Suffolk? No.
No one's heard of where we live, Matt, honestly.
Oh, they have heard about it because there's a gap in coverage for Flightradar24.
Right.
Oh, is there?
Oh no! Don't excite Carlos, please. Absolutely. APG, the airline pilot, shy? No, they're not shy at all. The airline pilot guy were just saying there. John, if you can just pop that back up. He says saying that Acme Airlines is the best US airline, no contest. Apparently, I don't know what he means by that. Yeah.
I get it. Don't worry.
Fair enough. That's good.
But it's good that you guys track that, because a lot of times, I'd say twice a year, Carlos, we do a top 10 airline ratings, things like that. And sometimes, it's a public article that we've pulled from some source, and we read it, and then we all kind of scratch our heads and go, man, how did they come up with this list? Because I don't know.
Well, it's all personal, down to personal preference, what you like, what you might not like. Some people love that BA seat. I hate it. I love Delta's new seat. Other people think it's too narrow or too short. It comes down to the individual, what you like or what you don't like. So I think when you read those stories of here's the top 10 best airlines in the world determined by the intern that works at the Point Sky or something, that has no value to me as the individual, but it's a decent article, I guess.
Yeah, as long as he's speaking from personal experience, I suppose. Yeah,
exactly.
So where is it that you guys want to? So here's 2021. Everything's better now, and everybody's superhuman. Where do you guys want to take the show this year?
Anywhere, literally anywhere.
Outside of
I don't
the
care.
View that you see behind me, and away from this.
Oh yeah, we actually had some really nice things planned for the spring of 2020, and that turned out not great. One of the things that we wanted to do that we kind of have to reconfigure and see if it's even possible or when it'll be possible. We were going to race each other around the world.
How cool is that?
All right.
And we were gonna start and end in the same place, but how you got there, it wouldn't matter. So Jason was a little less in on this because I wanted it to be more of a surprise for him. But we were kind of come up with the checklist.
He's not finding out now, is he?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm finding out again now.
Right.
Yeah, it's been so long,
and that's why the chemistry is so amazing, isn't it? They're like a married couple. They don't tell each other anything.
Yeah, but what Jason doesn't know is that when he gets over to our side of the world, Ian's booking him on all the Ryanair flights.
Oh right, okay.
Only if I get to fly EasyJet back.
Oh, I see. Okay. Anyway, sorry. Do carry on. We went on a slight tangent there. Yeah.
We'll take it. But that was one of the big things we were going to work on, and we were going to go to some other places to talk with airlines, and we were going to do an airframer tour. But those things have kind of all been put on pause or shelved for now. At this point, we would take anything. We're actually going to see each other not for a podcast, but for a hot dog come next week. So I'm sure we'll get up to no good there. But yeah, like I said, anywhere. We'll take the show anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think it's the same for us actually, because it's like the community actually is why we give up our private time, if you like, to do that, because the community is amazing, and that is one of the things that I'm absolutely missing. Is that interaction with the community, like one-on-one, like when you turn up to an air show and you get a chance to sort of chat with people. I mean, that's something that we look forward to so much.
Yeah, and by all accounts, it seems that Sun and Fun is happening right now. So I think my brother said he was heading that way, but it seems like Oshkosh is happening and the Reno Air Races are happening. So aviation is awakening again this year, and hopefully we'll see you guys there.
So, guys, we've got some questions from the chat room we're going to fire at you. We've got our first one from Lee Davies here. It says, how excited do you guys get when you hear the Antonov 225 will be flying, and do you personally track it?
Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I hope one day I get to see it in person and it comes to somewhere around where I live and I can actually see it personally. But yeah, how could you not track that thing?
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Just look up. That's a big one. Both, I mean, personally, just to see where it's headed and the fact that it can get in the air, but also wanted to make sure that the site is, everyone's following it and things like that, because that's always a big one for everybody.
Lane Street is asking, are you guys pilots in your spare time?
Spare time.
Okay. What's that exactly?
Free time.
So that is a concept I would love to have someone explain to me.
Right.
No. I don't think Jason might be a secret pilot.
I might be, but I'll never tell.
Yeah, quite. Absolutely.
I plan on getting my license. That's one of those when the kids are a little bit older things on the list. Once we get them, further into school.
Dirk S asks a technical question. Will satellite-based ADS-B replace terrestrial feeder in the future? Where is that technology heading?
No, satellite-based ADS-B will not replace terrestrial in the future. It is a great complement, but it's not a great replacement. Terrestrial data is still extremely important, if only to have multi-source, especially on something as important as ADS-B data, as it becomes more of a surveillance technology used by navigation service providers. But there's also a lot you can do with terrestrial receivers that you can't do with space-based receivers, because they're moving. The space-based receivers are moving. So things like MLAT become a very difficult. So basically a triangulation technology, for anyone not familiar, that becomes impossible with satellites. And it's a good check on the technology to be able to do that with the receivers. Plus the cost of having a satellite network versus terrestrial receivers is orders of magnitude higher. So being able to deploy lower cost receivers in places is to be able to saturate the coverages. I think one thing that's not going to go away ever, and certainly not quickly.
Jason, we're going to direct this question at you, I think. Bob Croman says in the chat room, JetBlue transatlantic. Any thoughts?
Oh, yeah, I have lots of thoughts. I would like to be on the first flight, but again, there's that whole matter of I'm not allowed to leave the country as an American or go anywhere interesting. It looks like an amazing product. I was actually on the very first Mint flight originally, almost like 8 years ago or something like that at this point. So it really, to me, looks like I'm not going to say a revolutionary product, but it is very highly competitive to what else is flying out to London. I would love more than anything else to know which airports JetBlue is going to operate to, whether it's Heathrow or Gatwick or wherever. But as I will hope that my first flight over the Atlantic is JetBlue in that new Mint seat, because it looks really good.
And one from Captain Cruz is saying, actually quite an interesting one for all of us who've got the app on our phones and stuff. Are there any new features that Flightradar24 are looking to add to the offering?
Yes. I'm trying to think what I can talk about that's far enough along that I can talk about, that I won't get in trouble with the developers going, no, we're not ready for that yet. So right now we're working on a lot of incremental stuff, kind of standardizing across the platform. We released the new web on it was a few months ago now. So on the new website to kind of match the apps and things like that. One of the things that we're working on to bring to the apps is a better individual playback, to kind of complement the history that's available there. And then a lot of the things that we're working on to kind of standardize more, kind of make it feel the same whether or not you're using it on the web or in the app, and bring more data to everything. So we'll have kind of additional ways to save and view what you care about the most. So you'll be able to dive right into what you want to see, whether it's airports, airlines, and things like that.
And we're going to make everyone listen to the podcast once through before they're able to track a flight too.
Quite,
so that'd be great for us.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, definitely the way forward.
So I'll ask, Philip in the chat room asks, what was the most tracked flight last year? And then I'll piggyback on that. You mentioned the Antonov. What are the most tracked aircraft? If you know.
That's so the most tracked flight last year is not one I know off the top of my head, because there weren't really, we didn't really have many that were huge. Huge. Actually, I take that back. Last year was 2020. I blocked 2020 out of my mind and just gone back to 2019.
I don't blame you. Good call.
Yeah.
As most of us have.
Yeah.
So the most tracked flight of last year was the Turkish Airlines flight that drew the Turkish flag over Turkey. That was almost 2 million people watched it live.
Oh wow!
Wow.
So that was a really big one. They did a really good job on their end of promoting what they were doing. So that's where a lot of the traffic came from for that.
I mean, from a technical aspect, does that when stuff like that happens, where there's a big event like that, are you saying there's like over 2 million people suddenly bombard your website / services to monitor that? I mean, that must cause some technical issues as well when you get a massive load like that.
It has in the past. I don't know if anyone remembers, I think it was April 2019 when there was an Air Canada 767 that
that flight,
it had to dump fuel, or not dump fuel, but because it couldn't.
It was like an 8-hour
fuel
hold,
yeah,
right?
so they flew it. It was it was nearly an 8-hour flight from Madrid to Madrid, and the sustained load on the site eventually buckled it. So we've been tested under fire and learned a lot. And so now the scalability of the site, I think, is one of the things that we really pride on ourselves to be able to handle that, because we know that usually it's when something bad is happening, we're going to get a crush of traffic. So being able to handle that rush is something that we've learned, unfortunately, the hard way.
Yeah, I think that's how we all do it. That's how we all learn, isn't it?
Isn't that how anybody learns anything?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh dear, the site's gone down. We need to fix it quick. Yes.
Now, Armando, before we let our guests get back to their, because I know, Jason, you've got to get back to your work, your job. But Armando, you've got a question to ask both Ian and Jason, haven't you?
Is this the question?
The
question. All right. Well, because we have two guests on, one of you is going to have an advantage to think about it. But the one question that we ask everybody that comes on the show is, if money was no object and you could fly or fly on any aircraft in the world, past, present, or future, what aircraft would that be?
SR-71. I don't even have to think about it.
Damn.
All right.
Wow.
Done.
Okay. So
Like, you didn't even give me a second to think about it.
You didn't even finish the question.
I was gonna say Concorde, but the SR-71 goes faster, so I want that.
Okay. Oh, so sorry. Excuse the non-nerd here. Exactly. So what is it that gets you so excited about the SR-71? What is it that makes you go, wow, yeah, I want to fly on that?
Well, the thing about the SR-71 that gets me kind of so fascinated is the technology that they were able to come up with in the time period they came up with it, and to take the engines that were available, the technology that was available, kind of weld together this leaky Hulk, and then as soon as it got airborne, it turned into this amazing machine that could not be caught.
Wow.
And to me, that is just, so, and to be able to see to not have to go to space, to be able to basically see Earth from space. I mean, that just seems like a lot of fun.
Yeah, very cool. And would you? So, are you both in agreement there now? As I say, we've switched from.
I've railroaded Jason.
No, I'm sticking with my answer. Concorde all the way.
Now, actually,
That's wonderful.
we could flip it the other way, of course, because if you've got any questions, Nev has actually been a passenger on Concorde.
Yes, it was my first ever flight when I was
Wow.
14 years old. Yeah, very
Wow.
My
You can't really go up from. I mean, I feel like you're spoiled
peaked
on your
at
first
14.
Yeah, that's it. I'm done.
Because the
He's
next
been trying
one that
ever
went
since.
on three years later was a 737-200 from Luton. So
Oh my! Oh dear!
An understatement.
That's how very sad. Yeah. Oh dear. Well, listen, guys, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so very much for joining us.
But before you go, Ian and Jason, just give us a benefit of the listeners who may not know, where can they find your guys' podcast and everything about
Social media links and
social
all that sort
media,
of thing, yeah.
websites.
Sure. So the podcast is called AvTalk, AvTalk. It is found wherever fine podcasts are found, iTunes, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, et cetera. And if you go to the main Flightradar24 page, flightradar24.com, and then click on social and click on the AvTalk button, and you can download, subscribe, et cetera, from whichever podcast catcher you enjoy.
Well, Ian and Jason, could I say a big thanks from all the team here at Plane Talking UK. Thank you for taking time out of your day to come and join us on the show this evening. And all the very best for the future. And if you don't already listen to the show, guys, take yourselves over and listen to AvTalk, downloadable via iTunes and many other platforms.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks, guys. All the very best, and take care, and we'll look forward to having you perhaps back on the show in the future.
We haven't scared them off, that is. Yes. So next up, we're going to go to the Plain Truths. This week, I'm asking the questions to Al, as always, about the differences between captain and first officer and how one would basically transition into becoming a captain. Hello and welcome to another Plain Truth, and this week we're going to be learning about the differences between the captain and the first officer. Joining me, as always, is the legend that is Captain Al. Hi, Captain Al.
Hi, Matt.
So, I've always wanted to know, I mean, I know initially that the captain is in charge and the first officer is their second in command. But what are the differences between the captain and the first officer, and what their roles are really as far as the airline is concerned? And also, as a first officer, how do you go from that to becoming a captain? I mean, is it additional training, et cetera, et cetera?
Okay, so let's start off at the very beginning of your statement then. So the captain's not in charge, the commander of the aircraft is in charge. And the reason I say that is that you may well have a flight with more than one captain on board.
Oh.
So the captain is a rank, but the commander is the legal position. So if you look at very long flights, say, for example, flights that are being done at the moment where carriers are going from the UK to China, loading up with cargo and then coming straight back. So nobody's going off to hotels, etc., etc. There will be more than one operating crew on the aircraft, perhaps two or three, in fact. There'll be several captains, that's a rank within the airline, but there will only be one commander at any one given time. So it's the commander who's legally in charge of the aeroplane. Now, typically in civilian aviation, that will be someone holding the rank of captain. In the Air Force, the commander of the aeroplane may not be the most senior person on board, but we'll stick to civilian for the time being. So the commander's in charge. So captains, senior first officers, second officers, they are all, if you like, various grades within that airline. So all airlines will have captains. Not airlines will have senior first officers, second first officers. They're just different names. So in some sort of South East Asian airlines, say Cathay Pacific, used to have second officers, first officers, senior first officers, and then captains. So it's basically revolves around experience. What I need to say from the very outset is that all of these are pilots, and they're all licensed pilots. They've all done the type rating. It's just about experience and time served within that airline if it's a seniority-based airline. If we start at the lower rank, so second officer, that will be typically someone who is new to the airline, low in experience, and they will just really be operating the aeroplane in the cruise phase. So on very long flights, we've discussed before that crew members will need to take rests. They'll go off to bunks or seats in the cabin. So you'll revolve, your crew members around. So the second officer will sit in one of the seats for a section of the cruise phase. And that's what they do. They don't do takeoffs. They don't do landings. Then when you've got a bit more experience, you'll get promoted to first officer. And then you might be in a position where you can be in one of the seats in the front for a takeoff or a landing. And again, the way that different airlines handle this is all different. So it may be that when you've reached the level that is appropriate for an upgrade to captain, you might hold the rank of senior first officer, or it might be based on number of years with the company, or how many hours you have on type. Each airline has its own way of doing this. Then you will be biding your time to get your upgrade to captain. So the process of upgrade varies from airline to airline. So in some airlines, you might have been achieving the standard required to be a captain for quite some time, and it's just that you're waiting for someone to retire or die to free up a slot in the left-hand seat for you to get promoted. Dead man's shoes. If you're in an airline that doesn't have a seniority list and it's more a meritocracy, you'll probably get a faster command. If you're in a young and expanding airline, you're going to get a faster command. But as an example, the Australian airline Qantas, I know a guy who joined Qantas 25 years ago, and although he's more than capable, he is waiting for his upgrade slot because the time to command prior to COVID was around about 26, 27 years.
Wow.
So what's involved in upgrading to captain? Well, quite a lot, actually, mainly because the airline entrusts to its captains a huge amount of responsibility. Obviously, you're entrusted with the lives of your passengers, but you're also making multi-million pound decisions on a daily basis. So it's quite senior management level, really. So they want to make sure that when they give you this autonomy to go off to various parts of the world and make decisions on behalf of the company, that they can be reasonably confident that you can make those decisions. And of course, a lot of those decisions will have been made in the air, where you don't necessarily have the capability to, phone a friend, take a 50-50, or ask the audience as to what you should do. It's on your shoulders. Now, of course, you can use all the resources available, speak to your colleagues, maybe organize a SATCOM call, etc., etc. But ultimately, it's you that's making the decision. So they want to have a careful analysis of what might be called the soft skills, because they know you can fly the aeroplane, because they're not going to give you the promotion if you've not been able to demonstrate that you can fly the aeroplane properly. So that's a given. So we're looking about all of the management skills and the decision-making skills. And key aspects are, what sort of guy are you going to be in the left-hand seat? Are you going to be a company man? Are you going to be a maverick? Are you going to be a good leader? Are you going to be a dictator? Are you going to command the respect of your crew? These are the sort of questions that are going to be asked of you. And, they're quite meaty, sort of subjects. They're delving quite a lot into your personality and your behavior. So the way that it tends to go in a lot of airlines these days is that there is quite a long assessment period. And even for airlines that have a very quick time to command, you'll be assessed for your capabilities in the management role. So what they might do is when they're thinking about putting you for the upgrade to captain, they'll say, okay, Blogs, what we're going to do is you're going to fly in the right-hand seat as you do normally, but I, as the captain, are going to take a bit of a back seat, and you're going to, run the show, albeit from, the right-hand seat under supervision. And my best analogy for that is, I want you to imagine that you've been a passenger on a road journey. So someone's driven you from A to B countless times. But when you actually have to drive the car yourself from A to B, it takes a lot more effort to remember where you're supposed to be going, doesn't it?
Yeah, I can't disagree with you there.
Yeah. So we've been sat fat, dumb and happy whilst we've been driven from A to B. But now we've got to do it ourselves. It's all of a sudden a bit more tricky when I've done the journey as a passenger loads of times. So what happens is that all of a sudden, really, the senior first officers, doesn't matter, suddenly get a little bit of they get to dip their toe in the water. And they suddenly realise that all of this stuff that they've just been watching and, baby being involved with is a lot harder than it looks. Now, I'm not trying to big the part up here. But as a captain, everybody tends to look at you. And it doesn't matter whether it's a case of, well, the crew meals haven't arrived, or we've got a passenger who's attacked another passenger, or we've got a fire. You get those same kind of looks, and people are looking to you for answers, leadership, calmness, and to take responsibility. What they don't want to see is, oh, well, you deal with it, I'm busy, or, well, don't ask me, I haven't got a clue. We want to see captains who appear very much like swans. So all sort of calmness and serene on the outside, and it doesn't matter whether you're pedaling like hell on the inside underwater. People don't see that. So that's what we're kind of looking for. It's someone who is able to break things down, use all of the skills that they have to problem solve and deal with things. And there are occasions where when people have their upgrade, that the power goes to their head and they turn into absolute complete dictators. So we try very hard to prevent that happening. So that's some of the processes that go through. And then there is quite a comprehensive assessment in the simulator where basically, having already demonstrated that you know your stuff, they throw you in just about everything that they can possibly think of to see whether you break, really. It's not so much about how you deal with the problem, it's can you deal with the problems? Have you got what it takes to just keep the thing flying, no matter what is thrown at you? Keep it away from the mountains, don't crash it into the sea, and just cope. And it's just to see how much you can be pushed, because people do break. And it's to see whether you've got a breaking point that's, acceptable, really. And that's quite interesting to see, because quite often you'll be presented with scenarios that are quite a long way down the chain of likelihood. And you may have only seen this particular defect when you did your initial type rating, which might have been 20 years ago, which probably is a good indicator of how reliable model aeroplanes are. So you've been presented with a fairly unrealistic scenario that requires an awful lot of technical skill and an awful lot of management skill. Of course, you're not expecting a polished performance because you're, for want of a better expression, potentially an inexperienced captain, but you're wanting to see that the right building blocks are there for the good decisions. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, very much so. I think it's safe to say then that perhaps all pilots don't necessarily suit the role of captain.
Indeed, there are quite a lot of people who don't want the role. They're quite happy to be a pilot and to fly the aeroplane, but they don't want the additional responsibilities, and that's fine. A lot of airlines kind of are a bit awkward about that, really, because they want to recruit captains. And ordinarily, you wouldn't go to an interview for a pilot's job in an airline and say, I don't want to be promoted. It doesn't necessarily display the right intent. But once you're within an airline, there are some people who go, actually, I just enjoy doing this. I'm quite happy being in the right-hand seat. I like flying the aeroplane. I don't like the challenges of the, additional responsibilities. And, you have to deal with an awful lot of sort of trivia, niff-naff, paperwork, lots of form filling when things happen. And of course, you do take on board all of the legal responsibilities. If you're unfortunate enough to have a death on board, you're responsible for the paperwork. If you have incidents with unruly passengers, well, it's you that's responsible for giving statements to the police and making sure that they're correctly worded, etc. So there is a lot to it, and it doesn't appeal to everybody. And there are people who go through the upgrade process and fail, and they will then go back into the right hand seat, and it may be that they subsequently are promoted when they've had a bit more experience and a bit more guidance, or they just feel that it's not for them and they'll stay there. And actually, some of those are really great guys and girls to fly with because they've got a wealth of experience, and they're not trying to display their potential command capability to you. So they're not trying to nip at the heels of the old guy. That they're quite happy with what you're doing, and just put the odd piece of really useful information into the equation.
As always, Al, fascinating. Many thanks.
It's a pleasure.
So it's time for the commercial news part of the show. So if all the guys are ready.
Ready to go?
Yes,
Let's
yeah.
go.
Let's do it.
Blimey. Honestly, you didn't give me a chance to change sources then. Blimey. Oh.
John's fault.
Okay, fair enough. Right. Off you go then. You can start now.
Yes. Good. Sorry, we weren't very enthusiastic about the start of
So, that's my fault. I thought it was. I assumed it was Carlos, and here am I looking at the notes. Hang on a minute. No, it's Nev.
No,
I'm so sorry, Nev. I wouldn't have mucked about if I'd have known it was you. I do apologise.
Worry not. It's all good. Now, this is an interesting first story from businesslive.co.uk. The sale of FLYBE has been completed, and the FLYBE name could take to the skies again this summer after administrators for the failed firm completed the sale of its business and assets to a new business. Exeter headquartered FLYBE Limited collapsed in early 2020, but administrators at restructuring firm EY have completed a deal which will also see an unspecified number of jobs transferred to a new company affiliated with investment advisor Cyrus Capital. The new company, previously known as Time Opco Limited, will now be renamed FLYBE Limited and hopes to start flights in 2021. A FLYBE spokesman said, "We are extremely excited to announce the conclusion of almost 6 months of dedicated hard work by the great team at FLYBE, the UK Civil Aviation Authority, the European Commission and the many others who made this announcement possible. Today's news represents a critical first step in our mission to accomplish the first ever rescue of an insolvent British airline. While our company will initially be smaller than before, we intend to grow, creating valuable jobs and making a significant contribution to essential regional connectivity in the UK and the EU." That's some fantastic news, isn't it? Some really good news to hear that. And I noticed that it had gone very quiet. So there's obviously lots of negotiations going on. But really, really pleased to say that they are going to be back in some shape or form. And we certainly need them for the regional operations in the UK and the near continent as well.
Because I was saying in our production meeting, I was saying because I sort of rather foolishly assumed that sort of Logan Air had picked up like a lot of the slack. But you were saying actually there is... They picked up some of the routes, but there was still a lot of the sort of like essential travel routes that still weren't being covered.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's those sort of routes, I don't know whether they're going to be doing, but, things like Exeter to Norwich, for example,
right. Okay.
Or Exeter to Aberdeen, Glasgow, Edinburgh, Inverness, those sort of places. So let's see what the route structure is going to be.
Yeah,
so,
what comes onto the schedules. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
story number 2, not quite the usual, but exciting news also actually involving Southampton, and the headline from the Daily Echo says that Southampton Airport runway extension plans have been approved, thanks to James, who sent this in to us via Twitter. So in episode 361 we ran a story where Eastleigh's local area committee voted 5-3 against the 164 538 foot so 164 metres 538 foot extension to Southampton Airport runway. That decision was then brought to the full council, and in the last week, we've seen that the full Eastleigh Council debate and listened to the public on the topic. After 19 hours of deliberations at 2:15 a.m. Saturday the 10th of April, plans to expand the runway at Southampton Airport were given the green light. 22 councillors voted in favour, with 13 against and 1 abstention. The debate centred around climate change and noise increases, the use of the airport as a lifeline for the Channel Islands, as well as the job creation and investment opportunities that the extension would bring. During the discussion, Steve Sasley, who's the operations director at the airport, told councillors that it was a divisive issue, and while there was no denying a climate emergency, that could be tackled with technological solutions once a sound economy had been established. The jobs and the security created by the runway extension would lend itself to its goal. Now, I think it might have actually been in episode 361, we were talking actually that maybe that is the future, isn't it? Is encouraging people to use their local airports rather than the sort of national hubs for these trips. Maybe. I mean, I know Norwich do a lot of stuff where they fly into Schiphol, don't they? And then you can basically go anywhere else in the world from there, can't you? I mean, is this something that some of the smaller regional airports could also be doing?
Yeah, there's certainly some of that, and obviously, serving Jersey and Guernsey, for example, as well. But also with a 6,000-foot runway, which they will have, then that opens up some longer route possibilities, especially with the A320 and 321neo aircraft, as an example, and probably the 737 MAX as well, because they've got very good range and very good performance off of a relatively short runway. So I think that could be another good thing as well. So you might see some longer haul. I mean, I don't think we'll see US routes going from Southampton, but certainly the longer haul European
into Europe.
flights. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, like the sound
It's
of it.
quite a trek for me and you, though, Matt.
No, I know, but it is. Again, I suppose I'm just sort of trying to think from a regional airport point of view, isn't it? Airport point of view, really, to sort of encourage us to use them.
Southampton used to have a lot of FLYBE routes to Amsterdam as well. So I think that's probably a good thing. So it's
Richard Adams is saying actually I think they have to extend towards the railway. Doesn't add a huge amount, mind you. What a place to plane spot from. That's a good point, isn't it? Yeah, love it. Yeah.
So the next story comes to us from aerotime.aero and newsroom.aviator.aero. And headline, LATAM Brazil to replace Airbus A350 fleet with Chilean Boeing 787. So LATAM are binning all their A350s off because they don't like them anymore. As part of its restructuring process, LATAM Airlines Group decided to retire LATAM Brazil's 11 A350-900 airliners immediately. Actually, I think that was going to happen by the end of close of play today, if I remember rightly. It's also announced that all international routes to and from Chile will be suspended, allowing its Chilean subsidiary Dreamliners to carry out long-haul flights to and from Brazil. In a letter sent to the company's employees on April the 8th, 2021, LATAM Brazil CEO Jerome Cartier explained that 7 aircraft were out of the fleet immediately, with the other 4 due to be following them by the end of the following week. The latest aircraft had been delivered on January the 8th, 2021. This sudden retirement means that LATAM Brazil's long-haul fleet is currently entirely consists of Boeing aircraft, namely 7 767s, 6 777s, but LATAM Brazil has already filed a request for adding new aircraft models and the Boeing 787 Dreamliner to the Brazilian National Civil Aviation Agency. The aircraft should be deducted from the fleet of LATAM Chile, according to the local aviation portal Contato Radar. From April the 5th to the 30th of April 2021, LATAM has suspended all international routes to and from Chile, with only a few repatriation flights remaining in operation due to the resurgence of the COVID-19 pandemic. Feel free to drink. In March 2021, LATAM announced it would auction 7 of its aircraft, including 2 A350s, 4 787s, and an 11 single-aisle aircraft in an attempt to improve its financial situation. So it just notes on the auction was due to take place on April 14th, 2021, and was organised by the Lesser Skyworks Leasing in Ireland. Yeah, I see what there's a part of the reason I think could be not just because they don't like the A350 anymore, but as a kind of cost-cutting measure, if you're going to have a fleet such as Ryanair, like what they do with the 737s, all Boeing fleet, it's one aircraft type, one maintenance kind of thing program. So
it's a little bit interesting that it is a bit sudden, but LATAM, the group is huge. There's LATAM Brazil, Chile, Colombia, Ecuador, LATAM Express, Peru. So that's pretty, and they operate quite a few Airbus 319s and 320s. So it's just it's just interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think they're just transferring from one to the another. So sort of retirement, more like reallocation.
Yeah.
So Armando, sticking with you and cheap flights.
Yeah, speaking of airlines, on April 8th, Avelo Airlines announced its debut, making it we're going to use quotes, first mainline U.S. carrier to launch in nearly 15 years, end quotes. That's the Houston-based ultra-low-cost carrier will officially begin operations out of Hollywood Burbank Airport. Weird, I was just there, on April 28th, 2021. Avelo chairman and CEO Andrew Levy is confident that a pay less, travel more business model is the incentive that cooped-up travelers are looking for. He says people are ready to reconnect with family and friends and explore new places. 11 nonstop routes between Burbank and, quote, markets across the western U.S. will start at the end of April for as little as $19 US. I think that's about 12 pounds or so.
Something like that, yeah.
Levy told Flight Global on April 9th that the first day ticket sales revenue exceeded several $100,000. Most of that $19 fare is actually government taxes and airport fees. The base fare was a whopping $4.28.
Steady.
But Levy knows that he cannot run a profitable airline on fares under $5. Low fares drive a ton of awareness, but if you offer stupidly low fares, even more so, he says. Clearly, these are not sustainable prices, but we are not going to need that same kind of revenue as others need to make their numbers work. Levy was previously the co-founder and former president of Allegiant Air and ex-chief financial officer at United Airlines. When asked about his timing for launching a new airline, Levy said, in essence, one of his major motivating factors is that pre-pandemic, the country's top 10 airlines had not been playing fair. When all 10 incumbents are all making money year in, year out for 10 years straight, that tells you something. To me, it tells me there's not enough competition out there. It's as simple as that. So there you go. You can book these flights at aveloair.com.
So now, we're quite lucky here in the UK, aren't we? Because, I often read a story where we're basically taking the mickey out of Ryanair week in, week out. But actually, we sort of really are quite lucky that we have both, don't we? We have EasyJet, we have Ryanair that are really offering very, very low rates of flight. And I think when I went with Owen to Toulouse, I think we were paying like £20 each way or something stupid, something stupidly cheap like that. And it's crazy, isn't it? And I almost find it unbelievable that there isn't a similar model in the States, given how much the US relies on flights.
Yeah, it's so here in Charlotte, North Carolina, I have only two extremes. I can either book on American Airlines if I happen to book something on Delta or United out of Charlotte, but really anything to get anywhere is going to be on American, or the complete opposite extreme is I can fly on Allegiant with no services whatsoever out of a remote airport here in Charlotte. We just don't have that middle ground in many of the cities. If you live in New York City, sure. If you live in Boston, but if you live in St. Louis, Missouri, you're kind of stuck.
Yeah, true.
So moving on to the next story, Nev. It's good news from BA.
Yes, it is. Pleased to read this out, actually. It's these stories have been on simpleflying.com, bloomberg.com, and on Sam's site, on samchewy.com. And it says that Sean Doyle, Chief Executive Officer of British Airways, on Wednesday reaffirmed his plans to return the Airbus A380 to service as the airline gets back on its feet. Talking at a Kappa live webinar, Doyle revealed that the British flag carrier remains committed to the Airbus A380. The A380 works very well for British Airways, he said. We do have a base for the A380. It's in our plans, even on the east coast of the US. And even into Miami, we found that the A380 works very well. Clues about the airline's commitment to the A380 are also shown through their storage activities. BA has been cycling all of its A380s to Heathrow for regular maintenance. If BA weren't reasonably convinced it would fly the A380 again, these maintenance costs wouldn't make sense. However, in contrast, Lufthansa has been sending its fleet to long-term storage, with the latest one, Delta Alpha Indigo Mike Echo, departing Frankfurt this morning for Spain. Lufthansa Group CEO Carsten Spohr has suggested several times that the giant may not return to the skies for Lufthansa. Qantas's CEO Alan Joyce also said at the same webinar event that we think we will reactivate all of our A380s. We spent a lot of money on them. Once demand is there, they're going to be a good aircraft. Elsewhere, Dubai-based giants Emirates is echoing Doyle's views. In a recent interview with Simple Flying, Sir Tim Clark said Heathrow slots are restricted. Hong Kong slots are restricted. Every single major hub is restricted on slots. So if you want to put a 787 in there on a Heathrow slot where you could put a 517-seater A380 in there, it doesn't take long to get to the max on that. However, lastly, Qatar CEO Akbar Al-Bakr, in an interview with Sam Chewy, had some very different views. He said that there's no future for the A380. It's the wrong aeroplane at the wrong time. It's very quiet and it's very spacious, but at the end of the day, for the operator, it's really painful to keep them in the skies. I not only think that the A380 is an inefficient aircraft, but some people are still bragging that they're going to start operating it, and that's going to be it says that it's going to be a very profitable aeroplane. Let's see how long they will be able to sustain that after the pandemic. So I think there's several schools of thought there, aren't there? But it will be very interesting. I just wonder whether BA might try it on some of those other routes that they've been trying larger aircraft on, not just the US ones, but some of the, perhaps into Athens, for example, something like that, and maybe sell some tickets, because it's all about the revenue at the moment. So the more people they can get on, the better. So let's see what routes they end up.
When we were having our chat with Michelle last week, actually, and one of the people in the chat room is where I heard that rumour from, that some airlines were planning on sort of bringing the A380 back into service, and part of me was quite surprised to hear that, but sort of given what you're saying there, it's I'm surprised BA are the ones doing it, if I'm honest.
Yes, I think they've probably got to do something different to the other major airlines like KLM, Lufthansa, and Air France. Certainly in the near European region at least. So let's see what routes they come back with.
Well, and the same with Emirates, isn't it? With their A380s, I mean, people have a lot of love for, maybe not so much from a cabin crew perspective, but I know a lot of passengers have a lot of love for the A380 and it's sort of what a comfortable flight it is. And
I remember, I think it was the CEO of Emirates saying, if you're going to operate the A380, you've got to operate a lot of them. And of course, from the point of view of where they're positioned geographically in the world, it's perfect for that. So
actually,
indeed.
Matt, you're right in what you said there. There's a lot of people as well who are very excited about Emirates' new premium economy cabin that they've got in the 380. So
I'm not surprised these are just, in sort of hindsight, I'm not surprised that these are the two airlines that are doing it. Apparently, we've got a comment from Richard Adams in the chat room, which
Richard says, wonder if there would be any scope for an ultra cattle class on an A380 to really pack it densely. Probably not for long haul though.
I mean, it's rated up to 800 people, I'm being told in my ear, which is 811, which is, sounds like a
Cool. Can you imagine that,
number.
Nev, on a BA 380 with you and 600 other or 699 other passengers on board?
No, I shall not be taking that flight.
Right, okay. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, on to the next story. And the headline on this is South Africa's newest airline, Lyft, launches dog-friendly flights.
Alfie?
Now I've got, okay. Well, I'll discuss my reservations in a moment. But South Africa's newest airline, Lyft, has launched a dog-friendly aircraft flight, allowing customers to travel with their small dogs on board in a pet-friendly carrier bag placed under the seat in front of them. To qualify, small dogs need to be at least 10 weeks old and able to fit into a dog carrier bag no bigger than 28 centimetres by 20 centimetres by 45 centimetres and no heavier than 8 kilograms to ensure that they fit under the seat. The cost of the dog-friendly booking, blocked off seat, will be equal to the fare paid by an accompanying adult. Lyft co-founder Jonathan Ayach, sorry if I got that wrong, said as a customer-focused airline, Lyft was flexible to changing the needs of our travellers. Many loving parents, I see what they did there, can't always take their pet, make use of pet hotels, family or friends to look after their pets. Moreover, they want to keep their four-legged family members to be included when they travel, and this has up till now not been possible when travelling by plane. Only 2 dogs are allowed to travel per flight on selected flights. Customers travelling with their dogs will need to purchase an additional window seat that will be blocked for the pet in specific zones, and the accompanying pet owner will need to be seated in the adjacent middle seat. Now, there is actually a picture that John has given us regarding the layout of it. It's not... Yes, I sort of like what they did there. So there's only a couple of sort of areas where you can do it. I mean, now, genuinely, one of my reservations with this, believe it or not, actually, is to do with my little Jack Russell, who would fit into that category of being small dog and able to go into a carrier underneath a seat. We'll gloss over how much he weighs. And... but he would be genuinely, he would be absolutely terrified.
So with all these... kind of things, animals or dogs being on the flights, there's a comment in the chat from Lee Davies who says, will it be straw and just relieve yourself as and when? I kind of see his point. A straw, but that's more of a farm animals kind of thing. I wouldn't have thought a dog would... Yeah.
I mean, you quite often have to have a pad in the bottom and stuff. But I mean, yeah, again, genuinely, I mean, again, if loud noises near my dog, and he will wet himself. So I mean, whilst in theory it sounds like
what about cats?
Can you imagine Poppy on a flight with her daddy? I can't see that personally.
Can you imagine Poppy sat 2 rows across from Alfie on a flight?
Good point. Well,
no, I mean, Alfie is used to cats because he has Mima.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, he's very, very used to that. But I'd say I've got reservations on this mainly because the noises are so strange, and if the dog isn't used to it, I mean, you may be lucky that your dog isn't terrified of anything. But yeah, anyway, we're being told we need to move on. So.
For us as avgeeks around the world, love to stand at airports and smell that beautiful smell of Jet A1 fuel burning from the aircraft. But how about standing behind an Airbus Beluga super transporter and smelling cooking oil? This one comes from from dside.com, and the headline: Airbus Beluga super transporter makes first flight from Broughton using fuel made partly from cooking oil. So Airbus says it has taken the next step in reducing its industrial carbon footprint with the maiden flight of a Beluga super transporter using sustainable aviation fuel, or SAF, from the aerospace company's Broughton plant. The Flightradar line station, which uses the Beluga fleet to transport aircraft wings to Toulouse, Hamburg, and Bremen, becomes the second Airbus European site to use SAF after Hamburg introduced the fuel to its cargo activities at the end of 2019. Sustainable aviation fuels are currently certified by regulators for up to 50% use in commercial flights. The Beluga fleet operating from Brighton will initially be loaded with a 35% blend of non-fossil derived fuel, set to reduce CO2 emissions by more than 400 tonnes over the next 3 months. The SAF used by the Beluga fleet is made from used sustainable feedstocks such as cooking oil and supplied to Airbus in Brighton by AirBP. Says here, Tony Derrin, Sustainable Aviation Fuels Project Manager for Airbus, said that combined with our ongoing research into the potential for 100% SAF in commercial flights, reducing fossil fuels in our own operations underlines Airbus's commitment to lessening the impact of our manufacturing footprint and contributing towards a more substantial and a more sustainable future for the aviation sector more generally. So what do we think, guys? Planes running on cooking fuel or cooking oil? I mean, there's plenty of it, waste cooking oil around.
I can speak from personal experience in regard to there was a phase where coaches did something very similar, where they were using it. And I must admit, my only lasting memory of that, shall we say, experiment, was the smell. And it weren't great. I've got to be honest. It was not a great smell. Now, we are talking a number of years ago when I had this particular experience, so maybe the refinement process is far more advanced than it was, and hopefully, but as I think it was it Captain Cruz that said in the chat room there, Beluga using fish and chip leftovers, quite fitting somehow. I don't know. I mean, it's great that they're using a reusable source. You're right there, Carlos.
Miles High says in the chat room, "Sir, if you ordered 2 pieces of fish, we might make it to Spain."
Right.
I like that one.
Okay, fair enough.
What do you reckon, Nev? We can get some cooking oil in the old banana?
Yeah, well, yes, that's right. I mean, it is. They do call it an oil burner anyway, don't they? So,
right.
Yeah, that is possible. I was just thinking, that, of course, if Captain Al was involved and we took this to a stage further, he could probably power the APU just on his own, I would imagine.
I mean, let's move on before we end up being sued, I think.
Armando, you've got quite an interesting story which you'll probably have a lot of knowledge on, I would say.
Yeah, who messed with the teleprompter? Former military whirly thingy transformed to a commercial water bomber. That pretty much sums it up. No, just kidding. That is in the show notes. Coulson Aviation debuted its newest aircraft in its aerial firefighting arsenal last week over the Alberni Valley. If anybody doesn't know, Coulson Aviation is a long-standing firefighting company, aerial firefighting. Chinook November 4-3 Charlie uniform. A heli tanker was just converted with Coulson's RADS-L tanking system that allows it to carry up to 3,000 gallons of fire suppressant. It is Coulson's 5th CH-47 in the company's fleet. It can fill its 3,000 gallon internal tank while on the ground or while hovering over a water source or a retardant source using its retractable snorkel hose. The complete overhaul and airframe conversion took place at the Alberni Valley Regional Airport in Coulson's hangar. The Chinook left April 10th for Irvine, California, where we'll get a new coat of paint at the International Aerospace Coating. Speaking of paint, I think Coulson's aircraft are some of the prettiest and coolest looking aircraft out there. Coulson's, what's that?
No, we're agreeing. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't sure if you were agreeing, disagreeing, or it was just a slice of pizza.
It may have been a little bit of everything.
Well, the article goes on. This Chinook is the 5th one. They've also got some UH-60 Blackhawks, Citation 550, working for 2 different companies at 4 air bases. These particular Chinooks have been loaded onto a cargo ship after working in Chile which we were just talking about Chile. They're going back to San Bernardino, California. Let's see, the president of the company says it was an opportunity to integrate large aircraft into major fire operations within the country of Chile. While flying in that country, each of these Chinooks and the Black Hawk flew with a pilot translator whose job it was to translate the instructions from the aerial supervisor or the ground crews. A lot of the translators are highly experienced airline pilots who are a great help on the radios and navigating the flight paths to fire operations. Colson Aviation operates Chinooks, Black Hawks, 737 Fireliners. If you haven't seen them, look it up. They're pretty cool. A couple C-130 Hercules, some Sikorsky S-61s, S-76s, and I believe they use these for charters, but they also have a Bombardier Challenger and a couple Cessna Citations, and then obviously 2 legendary Martin Mars aircraft, which are beautiful seaplanes. Go over to their website. This was on a couple different news sources, but if you just go over to colsonaviationusa.com, it has a nice page on their entire fleet. Very cool.
Love it. There is something quite magical about the Chinook, isn't there? That sort of it's that even for me as a sort of non-av geek, that's one of the few aircraft that I remember seeing, and my first reaction was like, wow, that's cool. And I think it's because it's the 2 rotors, isn't it? The sort of, you haven't got the little one on the side and the one on top. You've got just 2 big ones on top.
Yeah, there's been a few really iconic helicopters in history, and the Sky Crane was in the, I guess, 70s, this really powerful, super heavy lifting. I think it still holds some world records for how much it could lift. But then the Chinook came around, and just what a workhorse, right? The Chinook can carry so much cargo and people, and there's some great videos of them flying at high altitudes, high density altitudes too. So you can talk to 13, 14, 15,000 feet, and those guys are still working up there. Very cool.
So Nev, you've got the next story, which is just making me feel hungry.
Yes, it's a food subject which we always like talking about on this program. It's on the feastbox.co.uk website, and it says, "Are you longing for the days when you can set off on your travels once again?" Yes, is the answer. Then why not recreate the magic of flying by cooking some of the finest dishes from British Airways' first cabin in the comfort of your own home? Here at Feastbox, we're offering a unique at-home menu of their most popular starters, main courses and desserts. All dishes have been expertly crafted using British Airways catering partner Doe & Co. and redesigned by Feastbox so that they can be easily enjoyed at home. The bulk of the main courses have been made for you, so everything comes together in no time. Each first dining experience box contains 4 courses and serves 2 people. Enjoy your choice of starter and main course, and there's a vegetarian option for each, as well as a cheese board and dessert. Also, inside the box, you'll find a unique voucher to save 10% off your next British Airways flight. Plus, if you order for delivery before Friday the 23rd of April, you'll also get a complimentary bottle of Hattingley Valley's British Airways exclusive sparkling wine. Now, I might give this a go, actually, and I'll see. I'm going to have a look at it and see what, how much it is. If it's more than the £5 curry that we normally have on a Saturday night, I might have to decline.
I did look earlier, Nev, and then they're a little bit more than that. Perhaps you could do a Nev's passenger food experience.
Yes. That'll be the next thing. I'll put on even more weight. I
think Nev's basically saying here he's willing to do it if we pay for it.
Okay, we'll I'm sure we can dip into the Patreon and
I'll eat it live on air, shall I as well?
Right. Okay, that'll be a treat.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
That'll be nice.
Yeah, won't that be lovely for everyone? It's one of the I'll tell you what though. One thing I can tell you for certain, if it's given to me in a box and I've got to serve it, it certainly won't look as pretty as it does there on those plates. That I can assure you. It'll be sort of more slopped into. But
I must admit the pictures that are on the link to that story. you would. I'm not going to lie. I'd probably want to go and have a KFC after I'd had that.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
although I've got to say, British Airways portion sizes, certainly in business class, I don't know about first, but in business, they're pretty good actually. So yeah, I don't think you'll be hungry afterwards. But yeah, they always make these food look good for the photography, don't they, rather than for eating sometimes.
Can I just say that our chat room amazes us sometimes. You know the story we were talking about a moment ago, where we were talking about the Chinook and things like that, and then look what's just literally appeared on our WhatsApp number that was sent in by Jonathan Warner just now. Look, and this was taken yesterday. I should stress, and there he is. Look, with a. I mean, honestly.
It's basically live breaking news. Chinook takes to flight with minimal leaks.
Right. Okay. That is breaking news indeed. So thank you, Mr. Warner. Thank you for sending that in. Literally hot off the presses, and he recorded that last night. He does have a job, I believe, doesn't he? But
yeah, I've heard of what Mr. Warner's job is, and trust me, he don't work.
No, okay. Anyway, right. Trains, I think. Anyway,
I appreciate all the stories that he feeds my way because it makes me look better.
Right. Okay.
And on that note, Armando, you've got the last story, which is a good news story.
It is a good news story, depending on where you stand on this whole face mask debate, I suppose, here in the United States. A family was kicked off of a Southwest Airlines flight when their 2-year-old son could not keep his face mask on, but a private pilot who watched the dad's Facebook post about the incident offered them a free round-trip ride, according to reports. Eric Harvey and his wife, Michelle, planned for their April 1st trip from Denver to Austin, Texas, by trying to get their son Jackson used to wearing a face covering, as mandated by regulations. They said, I practiced with him for at least 2 or 3 times at the house, and every time he threw it off. But I figured that Southwest would work with us on the plane because he's 2. Jackson was wearing a mask when the family boarded. Eric said that everything went swimmingly until it wasn't, when the boy ripped off his mask. The flight attendant came up to me, and at that point, Jackson had taken off his mask. She said, I'm sorry, ma'am, you have to get off the plane. Your son needs to wear his mask. That's from the mother, Michelle. After pleading that they could try to hold the mask up to Jackson's face, I wouldn't suggest that. The family said that they were, again, ordered off the plane. They told their story on a Facebook video, which James Peck, an old family friend and private pilot, happened to watch. Peck flew his twin-engine plane to Denver, picked up the family, and flew them to Austin at no charge. He also offered to fly them back to Denver later. Southwest Airlines said, we regret the inconvenience this family experienced on their recent Southwest Airlines trip. However, federal law requires all customers aged 2 and over to wear a face mask while at the airport and on board the aircraft. It said the company's customer relations team reached out to the family to further discuss the situation.
Now, I'm a big fan of cabin crew, and they do not have an easy job.
Yeah.
I absolutely will say that right up front. However, they handled this appallingly, and it was such an easy win, but they just made a rod for their own back. Totally unnecessary, in my opinion.
Which is surprising, because Southwest are normally like one of, well, the nicest airlines we hear about on the show.
Yes.
Well, you know, like Nev said, it's they're stuck between a rock and a hard place because a regulation is a regulation. If he's over 2, and that's what the regulation.
I think what Nev is saying is there are ways that you can handle it, perhaps, and maybe that's the issue here, is that perhaps it wasn't handled in the best way, which has, essentially generated all this hubbub.
Yeah. No, I mean, you could argue either way with this one.
Yeah. No, fair point. Fair point. There we go. Okay. That is the commercial done. We'll be right back with the military in just a moment.
Well, welcome to our London studios. Welcome to the A320 Lounge webinar tech presentation, obviously for the 320 series.
Welcome to the A320 and 737 Lounge, bringing technical refresher courses directly to you. Using our cutting-edge broadcasting facilities, enjoy a fully interactive technical refresher course from the comfort of your own home. All of our webinars are live and you can ask your instructor a question at any point during the day. All of our instructors are highly experienced and can help you. No more expensive nights away from home, no new software required, just an internet connection. Courses are run at regular intervals, so check out A320 Lounge and 737lounge.com for more
despite our
details.
best efforts at running late on the show, guys, if we still have a little bit of time for military, if you're ready, I'm going to have Matt hit the button. Oh, that's great. I wish the audience could hear what goes on behind the scenes.
I don't.
Our first military story comes to us from channelstv.com. Nigeria is expected to receive 6 of the 12 Super Tucanos ordered from the United States in mid-July, according to the presidential office. According to presidential spokesman Garba Shehu, 14 Nigerian pilots are currently training with the aircraft at Moody Air Force Base in Georgia. In March, National Security Advisor Babangana Monguno had been quoted by the BBC as suggesting that funds for arms procurement had gone missing under the immediate past service chiefs. The Office of the National Security Advisor later put out a statement saying that Monguno had been kind of quoted out of context, but with an insurgency still alive in the country's northeast and the increasing threat of banditry in the northwest, critics have continued to question how well equipped the country's military actually is. Mr. Shehu himself has admitted that the Army has had some problems with procuring equipment as they arrive in bits and pieces. According to him, during an interview on Channel Television's Politics Today, procurements in the past have not been fully delivered. He said in August 2018, when they allowed the Nigerian government to buy 12 Super Tucano aircraft suitable for the kind of operations and the war we're fighting in the Northeast, he said, in addition to that, other arms of the military have also made procurements. The Navy has done nearly 100% of their procurement and equipment been delivered. The Air Force has bought a number of attack helicopters, 35 from Ukraine. Some of them have been commissioned on national television. We have bought a lot of drones, but with the Army, there have been problems with procurement. Equipment has been coming in bits and pieces. So this article was translated, I'm sure, from their local news source. But the Nigerian government has made some orders in the past, and some of those things, the funds have been allocated, yet not really delivered with the goods. So at least these 6 airplanes, and we've talked about the Super Tucano quite a bit in this light attack aircraft debate that the U.S. has been having, especially because this is the intent, is to export it out to our partner nations. So
John has a challenge for you, by the way, Armando.
Procurement.
Very good. Very good. I'm impressed. That backfired beautifully. Carlos, after you.
Blimey, I'm shocked. I'm not even going to bother trying. This next story comes from breakingdefense.com. Headline: Ukraine turns to West for fighters and plans to drop MiG fleet. Ukraine, faced with Russian troops on 2 fronts, has gone public with plans to buy combat aircraft that are not Russian-made. The venerable NATO partner plans to become independent of Vladimir Putin's military in a crucial domain. Unlike Poland, which has been operating mixed fleets of US and Russian-made aircraft, Ukraine is evaluating wholesale replacement of all of its Soviet-era MiG-29s and Su-27s. Jonathan Warner, you can almost hear him crying. This would make Ukraine a more effective NATO partner, but defense analysts caution there are critical short-term issues which should stop, and it should be a top priority for Washington's policymakers. Buying US aircraft would enhance Ukraine's inoperability with NATO, critically important for a nation that has the longest border with Russia. but say retired Western military personnel currently advising Ukraine's armed forces DC policymakers will have to commit to an unprecedented level of support for this beleaguered former vassal state of Moscow. The first step is that the US transferring a large tranche of hardware to Ukraine ASAP. One former UK officer here said then, there is even more potential politically unpalatable decision of placing a contingent of US military personnel here in the Ukraine to conduct a years-long training program in how to utilize this new hardware. The proverbial boots on the ground. Could this provoke Moscow? Yes. But with this country being surrounded by legions of troops and heavy equipment, the Kremlin acting like it's prepping for an invasion, how much worse could the reaction from the Russians be? Arming the Ukraine with the latest variants of the US fighter aircraft will take a long time. A recent op-ed by a long-time US analyst of the Russian military, Stephen Blank, proposed sending Ukraine F-15Cs and Ds, E-2Cs, 2000 Hawkeyes, AWACS and KC-135 airborne tankers immediately. There are excess defense articles, EDAs, aircraft now in storage in the US. The older F-15s could be upgraded, as they are being done for in Japan, and later supplemented with new build F-15EX models, which we featured, I think, on last week's show. This is not lost on Moscow. Another nation has signed to procure US aircraft, but Bulgaria has just broken up a Russian spy ring charged with collecting technical data for Russian intelligence and has booted some of Moscow's diplomats, a total of 5 expulsions since October 2019. According to sources in Bulgaria, the data included information on the F-16V Block 70, the latest generation model of the F-16 fighter, and its AN and APG-83 AESA radar, previously selected for procurement by the Bulgarian Air Force. I'm just trying to think what age the MiG-29s. The MiG-29s are fairly old technology now, I think, Armando, if I'm right in thinking.
Oh, yeah. I think they've been around since the 80s operationally. Same with the Su-27s. I think they've been around for quite a while now. But, this just goes that geopolitical spy versus spy game that continues on. But having a mixed fleet of anything, and we were talking about having a mixed fleet of Airbus and Boeing, is difficult enough. But imagine having a half Russian fleet and a half American fleet, and trying to source parts and budget maintenance and even reading manuals. Some are in Russian and some are in English. And I think making a move like this was probably just a more of a logistical thing of maintainability of these aircraft and interoperability with their NATO partners. So.
Nev, you've got Wanaka update.
Yes, good news from the air show in Wanaka on the warbirdsnews.com, and it says that with the air show world sensing a much hoped for return to normalcy beginning to arrive, the legendary biannual Warbirds over Wanaka International Air Show in Wanaka, New Zealand is already making plans for their event over the Easter weekend of 2022. As their recent press release stated. This air show will be particularly special as it'll help celebrate the 85th anniversary of the Royal New Zealand Air Force. While the 2020 air show was cancelled due to New Zealand being in COVID-19 lockdown, the 2022 event is already shaping up to be a must-see for all aviation enthusiasts, and tickets have begun selling as of March 15th. General Manager Ed Taylor says, following confirmation of the Royal New Zealand Air Force's presence, that discussions are already underway with a number of international air forces regarding their participation at Warbirds over Wanaka 2022. It's hoped that a number of air forces will be in attendance, Taylor noted, and Warbirds over Wanaka has hosted the air forces of the United States, Australia and France over recent years. Their display adds an international wow factor the crowds really appreciate, and we're always grateful for the support that they give our event, he said. The Royal New Zealand Air Force is a regular attendee at Warbirds over Wanaka and is looking forward to putting on a significant display next year. Air Vice Marshal Andrew Clark, who's the RNZAF's Chief of the Air Force, says that the ability to mark the Air Arm's 85th anniversary at Warbirds over Wanaka is a great opportunity, noting that our personnel enjoy being part of the air show, involved in the flying displays and on the ground engaging with attendees. To be able to mark an important milestone date in our history at the same time is fitting, and we're thankful to the Warbirds over Wanaka for this opportunity. So that's some good news finally for the air show calendar for next year.
Yeah, that's right. That's like we were talking with the guys from the podcast that it's just can't wait. Let's see. We'll just move on to this last story. This one's from warbirdnews.com. Last Friday, the Commemorative Air Force inaugurated the Henry B. Tippie National Aviation Education Center, named in honor of Mr. Tippie, who was a World War II veteran. It is the flagship of the American Air Power Heritage Museum. The NAEC is a 47,000 square foot facility at Dallas Executive Airport. It's dedicated to education with the mission to honor the past and empower the future, providing opportunities for all ages and backgrounds. It includes hands-on educational displays and historical artifacts. Educational programs inspire and foster the development of 21st century employable job skills and career paths. With construction completed, and we've been following that for a little while, internal fit and finish activities are underway. While the facility is currently closed to the public due to COVID-19, to limit the number of visitors at one time, various educational programs are being offered to registered participants following CDC protocols. A statement by Commemorative Air Force President, CEO Hank Coates says, "Thank you to the many of you who have joined us virtually for the ribbon cutting ceremony of the Henry Tippie National Aviation Education Center next to CAF National Headquarters. If you couldn't watch the live streamed event, I encourage you to view the recording on our YouTube page. The ribbon cutting was a celebration of the countless individuals who helped bring the NAEC to life, from the generosity of the family of the facility's namesake, Henry Tippie, and the many other founding donors to the tireless efforts of CAF general staff and employees. The NAEC is the fulfillment of a vision that began many, many years ago. The ceremony also was an opportunity to preview the Victor Agather STEM Innovation Hangar, the Brigadier General Charles McGee and Don Hines Theater, the gallery, and an education wing that includes classrooms and workshop areas that will inspire and educate generations to come. If you are interested in looking that up, go to flynaec.com, and you can even donate on their webpage. I know this sounds like it's for kids, but it's I would probably spend a couple of days there.
I was going to say these sorts of these things are important. I think. I mean, Armando, you've got a little one as well.
I mean, that picture that they put out, the aircraft that they're keeping in that hangar in that facility, that's amazing. I would just love to just walk around them and love them and pet them and talk to them. The airplanes.
No. That we assume that's where you were going with that. It is. I mean, a part of me is, if restrictions do lift, sort of May 17th, I think, is when the next set of restrictions lift here in the UK. And actually, I'm just really hoping that we have such a good summer like we did last year here, because actually, a lot of us want to go to Duxford. A lot of us want to go to these various, Flixton Museum, all these bits and bits and pieces. Because if we have a nice day, then we can almost sort of forget about last year. Do you know what I mean? Right? Sweep that under the carpet and never, sort of pretend it never happened and move on. But on the subject of moving on, that's it, guys. It's time to start wrapping up.
But we have got a little bit of something else to do, Matt. Don't. God, blimey, we're not done yet. Armando, you had a bit of fun, didn't you, with a certain airplane this week?
I did. Kind of speaking of warbirds, I was telling you guys in the pre-show. In a couple weeks, I'm going to start flying the DC-3 after I'm done with training, and I wanted to get it. Now I've got a little bit of tailwheel time, mostly in Cubs, and I did those aerobatic lessons in an extra. But I wanted to get into something that was challenging, a challenging tailwheel aircraft. And other people had said that the Boeing Stearman, for as old as it is actually on a scale of 1 to 10, somewhere around the 8 mark on being challenging to land and keep it straight, keep it on the runway, and sometimes even taxi. So I was lucky enough to find a local Stearman, if that's a thing. And I called the owner up and said, hey, can I get checked out in the Stearman? Here's my intent. And fortunately, he let me do it. So I managed to record a little bit of video. Matt, if you're ready, let's play that up. Now that right there is just the sound of 7 cylinders coming to life. This particular aircraft has a Continental radial engine on it. The Stearman, as probably all our fans know, came with a bunch of different engine combinations from Lycomings to Continentals and Pratt & Whitneys, but this was just an awesome airplane to fly, and what a great instructor. He really just took me through the whole lesson plan of taxiing first, and then taxiing at high speed with the tail on the ground, and then taxiing up and down the runway at even higher speed with the tail flying, never actually taking off. We spent an hour and change just doing that, never actually getting off the ground. And then he just did a wonderful job of explaining the nuances of this aircraft, and we took it up into the air, did some basic air work maneuver, and while that was beautiful, as you can see in the video there, it was a beautiful North Carolina day, and flying with that open cockpit was wonderful. But then came the hard part, which was doing the wheel landings and the 3-point landings. So we just spent a total of 3 hours in that airplane, 2 tanks of fuel, and yeah, it was challenging, but at no point did I scare myself. It was just a great time, and just what an opportunity to fly such a classic aircraft. And yeah, it was just awesome.
What sort of crosswind limits are there for takeoff and landing for the Stearman, Armando?
Well, I'm sure there's a demonstrated crosswind limit. Under the hands of a capable pilot, you could probably do 15, 20 knots, probably even more. I don't actually know the book answer to the demonstrated crosswind. I know when I was flying that day, it got up to about 10 knots, and it became challenging enough that we decided to call it a day. Now, part 2 of this lesson and this currency will be on Monday. So as long as the weather holds up, we're going to go back and do some more flying in that airplane.
What a terrible life you lead, Armando.
I was going to say.
Oh, honestly. Blimey.
The scenery, that beautiful aircraft. Oh, I mean, goodness me. It's a blessed life, my friend, isn't it?
It really is. And I'm happy to be able to share it with all of you guys.
So are we. Yeah. No, thanks for that. That was fantastic. What a real joy to witness that. And it's now, of course, the only downside to that, as you sort of alluded to there, is that we're not actually going to be able to have you for a couple of weeks, are we? Because it's back to school for you. Mm.
Yeah, and Captain Jeff, I told you guys this week, when he had to learn a new airplane, and right before he went into ground school and into the sim, he had to take some time off, and I'm going to be doing the same. So right now I'm trying to finish up the Stearman, and then studying for the DC-3, and that's a full type rating with a lot of flying. And then in addition to that, we have to learn how to fly it on our particular mission application, which is not your traditional just point A to point B flying. So for a couple weeks, I'll be out in California. I'll be sending in segments as much as I can, and checking in with you guys. And of course, I got to send in some video of that beautiful airplane.
Absolutely
the DC-3.
Must. Yeah,
100%.
100%. Fantastic. Well, that's good. I mean, I'm going to say the words "good luck," but I don't think you need it. I think I know you've got lots of books to read and all that kind of thing. But if I can't wait to hear the all about the next chapter.
I'll be happy to share it with you guys.
So just before we finish the show, we obviously each week I've been running a caption this on our social media site, Facebook, and it's a little picture that I'll pop up during the week and let you guys and girls comment. And
this one gave me a headache, I've got to be honest. And
Matt's going to put the picture up on the screen. For those of you who may not have seen it on Facebook, there is the picture on the screen for you. It's It's an Airbus A340, probably a Dash 600, I would say. And this one has, I forget what the total number of engines is on this.
Several, I think.
Several. It has a number of engines on this particular aircraft. I think I worked it out, John, was it over £2 million of thrust?
Something horrendous.
Yeah, over £2 million of thrust this aircraft would produce if it had these engines.
Yeah,
2.7 million. Yeah,
lots
2.7 million.
Lots and lots of people in the chat room, several of which we cannot read out. One from John, for example, we can't read that one out.
So we've got some captions which from Andrew. He says, with all the carriers going under thanks to COVID, Richard got us a great deal on these refurbished engines. Dan says Greta Thunberg's private jet arrived at Heathrow ahead of her conference on climate change.
That's just wrong.
Steve says Captain Nick now has time to sit back and have 2 cigarettes to assess the engine failure situation before going into panic mode. And also from Steve, he says the all-new Pritt and Watney powered 777.
Now you see, I see what he did there, because that's a little slip up I might have made last week.
Now, Nev, I'll let you take over from with Mark here, Mark Alexandra.
Yes, he says better practice that V1 cut just in case. Quite funny.
Right.
Joe says you can only operate it between the North Pole and South Pole airfields due to noise restrictions.
Yes, I like it.
Laura says the performance is great, but the fuel and maintenance costs are sky high.
Yes, I mean that's a lot of blades to look after, certainly, isn't it?
Yes. Golan says the flight was only $8, but the fuel surcharge was $22,000.
Yes.
Sarah says one of these should work.
Right.
Ben says more wine than Karen. I don't know who is to that to, but Ben says, or other Ben says, 40 engines for longer haul. Paul says asymmetric approved. I like that one. Jean says, I see a Kerbal has been here before. Glenn says fantastic performance with extremely short range. And David finishes off with 1 engine per seat.
Right. Yes. I mean that's.
Let's tie it back to earlier in the show. Richard Adams in the chat room says, "Well, that's going to need some serious chip oil."
Yes, I like that. Yes.
So don't forget to look out on social media if you are on Facebook. Check out next week when I'll be popping up another interesting aviation-related picture. So week ahead, what's coming up on next week's show? Hopefully, Armando, you're not going to be with us, unfortunately, but hopefully
we'll be here on next week's show.
Oh, next week will be. Oh, good. Full crew next week.
That's yay! Happy days. Good.
Full crew
news.
next week, so that'll be good.
How does that fit in terms of our restrictions? Obviously, where Nev and Armando are only allowed to be on so many shows together per year. Is that? I mean, has that broken protocol there, Nev? I mean, you know.
I think we can probably get away with it just this once.
Just this once, right.
Hopefully no one's noticed.
If nothing else, I look at it on the bright side. It's like we actually have somebody who knows what they're talking about with the military. When yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Nev, social media, where can the listeners find us in case they've missed us?
Oh, yes. Well, website, of course, planetalkinguk.com. Facebook, facebook.com/planetalkinguk. We're at planetalkinguk on Twitter, and we're on Instagram too, I believe.
Correct, yes. Plane Talking UK again as the search handle.
And you're going to tell me what the WhatsApp number is now as well, aren't you?
Yes, no, I can do that. I'm well clever. One of these days, you know what? I'll make a graphic and I'll pop it up, shall I? That'll make life easier, like I do with the kitchen discos. +44 757 22491 66. That's +44 757 22491 66. There you go.
And don't forget, if you are checking out our web page, you can also find the links on there to purchase a glorious P2K t-shirt on there and a P2K mug if you fancy one of those as well. And you can also find the links on there as well to our Amazon store, where you can buy things through the link and it will get a small referral fee, which is lovely. And if you want to become a patron of the show as well, or make a small donation, we'd love that as well. You can find those links on our website. A special reminder just before we go about our guests, Ian and Jason. You can find their podcast over on many podcast platforms, and just search for AvTalk. And we'll put all the links, or AvTalk. We'll put all the relevant links on our page for this show, for the show notes for the show. So make sure you look on there. You can find the guys over on Twitter at Petchmo, PETCHMO, and at Airline Flyer as well. You can find them on Twitter. So big thanks to those guys for joining us at the top of the show. So there we go. So that's it then, the guys and girls. We're going to bring episode 363 to a close. Thanks to everyone in the YouTube chat room tonight and all our audio listeners as well. From me, Carlos, here in the P2K studios, from Matt over in the studios for where he does the big things and stuff.
Bungie.
From Nev in his glorious Buckinghamshire studio. From Armando in his gloriously sunshiny Carolina studios. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. And see you next Friday.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all. To the